stage. One's a dance. He's a dance school.
I know. That, I was like, I think it deserves a second. I'm nominating that, and it's like, it was like, that's just great.
Good morning, and welcome to the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, the largest institution in the United States devoted to the arts, sciences, and artists in movie making. I'd like to welcome you to Godzillathon, the Academy Museum's very first movie marathon. And since I'll be introducing each of today's 5 films, I will only introduce myself once. My name is Robert Renaud. I'm one of the associate programmers in the museum's film programs department. I would like to acknowledge David Calat's book, A Critical History and Filmography of Toho's Godzilla series, which is my principal research source in these introductions. I'd also like to apologize in advance for my questionable pronunciation of many of the Japanese names which we mentioned today. I would also like to thank our theater operations team in advance, especially theater managers Sergio Torres, Emily Schertz, and Kim Lowe, and projectionist Lindsay Lavin and Spencer Cristiano. Our first film today is Gojira, directed by Ishiro Honda, originally released in Japan 70 years ago to this day, on November 3rd. On November 3rd, 1954, we'll be screening Gojira on a subtitled 35mm print, courtesy of Janus Films and Tower International. Several factors inspired the creation of the original Gojira. The 1952 re-release of the classic original 1933 version of King Kong. The success of the 1953 American dinosaur film, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which was the first film with stop-motion animation scenes created entirely by Ray Harryhausen. And of course, the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 had a pronounced influence on the story and tone of Gojira. The script began as an outline by Shigeru Kayama, titled Big Monster from 20,000 Miles Beneath the Sea. The name of the monster, Gojira, is believed to be a combination of the English language word gorilla and the Japanese word Kujira, which means whale. The screenplay by Takeo Murata and director Ishiro Honda removed some of the elements more openly derivative of the Harryhausen film and added such key plot points as the romantic triangle and Godzilla's deadly atomic breath. Toho, the studio that produced Gojira and all its sequels, also produced several of the Kurosawa films, including Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood, and Yojimbo. And there are many crossovers between the Godzilla series and Kurosawa's films. Ichi Tsuburaya, the head of visual effects at Toho, and one of the key creative figures of the Godzilla series, worked on such Kurosawa films as Seven Samurai and Throne of Blood. Takashi Shimura, who plays Dr. Yamane in Gojira, had 2 years earlier played the lead role in Kurosawa's film Ikiru, the same role which earned Bill Nighy Best Actor nomination just 2 years ago for the English language remake Living. Shimura also appeared in Rashomon, Seven Samurai, and Throne of Blood. Writer-director Ishiro Honda would direct 8 Godzilla films, as well as many other science fiction and monster films, including the original Mothra. Honda was a close friend and collaborator with Kurosawa, and worked as second unit or assistant director on such films as Kagemusha and Ran. The composer of Gojira was Akira Ifukube, who not only composed most of the musical themes commonly associated with the series, but also created the sound effect of Godzilla's roar by rubbing a leather glove over a contrabass. Ifukube had scored one film for Kurosawa, The Quiet Duel, about a doctor in World War II accidentally catches syphilis from a patient's blood while performing an operation. According to Ifukube, quote, "I told Kurosawa it's an unnatural, stupid story, and then we never worked together again," unquote. While Ifukube had become the principal composer for the original Godzilla series, several of the films, such as Godzilla Raids Again and Son of Godzilla, were scored by Masaru Sato, who scored many Kurosawa classics, including Yojimbo, Sanjuro, and High and Low. Gojira would release US theaters in 1956 under the title Godzilla, King of the Monsters. This is the version that would be seen by most American audiences until 1982, when the original Gojira was screened at film festivals and art houses, finally receiving a full US release in 2004. With the intent of making Gojira more accessible to American audiences, Godzilla King of the Monsters featured many new scenes in English, directed by Terry Morse, and starring Raven Burr as a new character, an American reporter named Steve Martin, whose name did not get unintentional laughs in 1956. This was just 1 year before Burr took on his most famous role as TV's Perry Mason. A brief reminder, please turn off your devices and no talking or eating during the film. Community partnership support for today's Godzillathon provided by Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, Gold House, Japan Foundation Los Angeles, Japan Society, Little Tokyo Historical Society, UCLA Terasaki Center for Japanese Studies, and Visual Communications. But before we begin the screening, I'd like to introduce someone who truly needs no introduction. The warrior of the wasteland, the Ayatollah of rock and roll, Golden Globe winner for most promising newcomer, and two-time winner of the Gene Herschel Planetarian Award. Ladies and gentlemen, the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla.
Stunt.
American monster, and for the first time in color and in widescreen for King Kong versus Godzilla.
That's a terrible movie, though.
Though Toho several times considered a Godzilla Kong rematch, the Toho Kong only appeared once more in the 1967 follow-up King Kong Escapes, where he battled his robot double, Mecha Kong.
That sounds like a good one.
2 years after losing to Kong, Godzilla battled Mothra in, of course, Mothra vs. Godzilla, released in the US as Godzilla vs. The Thing. In Godzilla's next monster team-up, he, Rodan, and Mothra all battle a brand new kaiju in the aptly titled Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster. This was actually the first time Godzilla was the good guy, defending humanity from evil monsters, a narrative role who had taken virtually every one of his Japanese films from that point on. In the meantime, a competing kaiju franchise began production, focusing on Gamera, the flying turtle. Who started 8 features between 1965 and 1980. One change in the Toho Godzilla series was that instead of adding new footage for the US market, some of these kaiju films actually featured American actors in their original casts. Great Monster War, shown in the US as Monster Zero or Invasion of Astro Monster, had aliens taking control of Godzilla, Rodan, and Ghidorah to attack the Earth, and starred 1963 supporting actor nominee Nick Adams, who also starred for Toho in Frankenstein Conquers the World. During that same period, West Side Story star and Peyton Place Oscar nominee Russ Tamblyn starred in the Frankenstein quasi-sequel War of the Gargantuas. The next film in the series, Godzilla, Ibira, Mothra, Big Duel in the South Sea, known in the West as either Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster or Ibira Horror of the Deep, is the first Godzilla directed by Jun Fukuda, who directed 5 films in the series, including the next one, Son of Godzilla, which introduced the title character, also known as Minilla or Baby Godzilla. For Godzilla's 9th big screen epic, the filmmakers of Toho considered ending the Godzilla series entirely, with the fittingly titled Destroyed All Monsters, known in Japan as March of the Monsters. The film introduced the kaiju sanctuary Monsterland and featured no less than 11 monsters, including series regulars Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, Ghidorah, and Minilla, as well as monsters that previously appeared in Toho's non-Godzilla films, such as Varan the Unbelievable, Manda from the movie Atragon, and Baragon from Frankenstein Conquers the World. Not to be confused with Gamera's adversary Barugon. There will be a 15-minute intermission roughly between each of the upcoming features. Don't forget to silence and darken your devices, and no talking or eating. Community partnership for today's Godzillathon provided by Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, Gold House, Japan Foundation Los Angeles, Japan House LA, Japan Society, Little Tokyo Historical Society, UCLA Terasaki Center for Japanese Studies, and Visual Communications. And now, directed by Ishiro Honda, on a DCP courtesy of Janus Films and Toho, get ready to destroy all monsters.
Yeah, I'm gonna get in line.
The lineup just reopened. Please go get in line. Thank you.
There will be at least a 50-minute intermission between the next two movies, and a reminder, please turn off your devices and no talking or eating. Community partnership provided for today's Godzillathon by Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, Gold House, Japan Foundation Los Angeles, Japan House LA, Japan Society, Little Tokyo Historical Society, UCLA Terasaki Center for Japanese Studies, and Visual Communications. And now on a DCP courtesy of Janus Films and Toho, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, also known as Godzilla vs. Smog Monster.
It's gonna be in 4K.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people here haven't left it off.
The new films reintroduce such classic kaiju as Mothra, Ghidorah, and Mechagodzilla, as well as pitting Godzilla against new monsters, including the colossal deadly flower Biollante and Space Godzilla. In Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, the humans battled their new enemy by using a manned flying robot named Gojira. Whose design is based on the alien robot from Toho's classic sci-fi film The Mysterians. This plotline may have been inspiration for filmmaker Guillermo del Toro's lavish 2013 3D kaiju epic Pacific Rim. At the same time, Gamera received his own reboot with 3 new films, and the flying turtle himself received something of a facelift. This particular series of Godzilla films concluded in 1995 with Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Meanwhile, American filmmakers have been attempting to make their own Godzilla film. In the early 1980s, following the success of his 3D slasher film Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D, director Steve Miner planned to make a 3D American Godzilla film featuring a stop-motion Godzilla, but he was unable to obtain studio financing. In 1994, the screenwriting team of Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, co-writers of such films as Aladdin, Shrek, and Pirates of the Caribbean, were hired to write a new American Godzilla script, and Jan de Bont, the cinematographer of Die Hard, who had just directed Speed, signed on to direct, but that version also never reached the screen. Finally, following the blockbuster success of 1996's Independence Day, the team of director Roland Emmerich and writer-producer Dean Devlin made a new American Godzilla, released in the summer of 1998, starring Matthew Broderick.
It was okay.
The filmmakers made the daring and controversial redecision to redesign Godzilla, giving the monster a more lizard-like appearance. But mostly because Independence Day had been such a gigantic hit, the Emmerich-Devlin Godzilla was considered a big box office disappointment, but it managed to make $136 million in the US and even more than that overseas, and was still one of the highest grossing films in the US that year. Though that Godzilla did not span any sequels, in 2014, director Gareth Edwards helmed a new American Godzilla with a Godzilla design more faithful to the original.
Yeah, gordito.
He got the mini one, dude.
They're gonna fall over. Backed by an impressive international cast, including such Oscar-nominated actors as Juliette Binoche, Bryan Cranston, Sally Hawkins, David Strathairn, and Ken Watanabe, whose line, "Let them fight," became an instant classic. This new Godzilla has since inspired 3 sequels, a Kong-focused prequel, and a spin-off TV series. Moving back to Japan and back in time to 1999, Toho restarted the Godzilla series once more with Godzilla Millennium, also known as Godzilla 2000, and followed it up with 5 more films, pitting Godzilla against such classic foes as Mothra, Ghidorah, and Mechagodzilla, culminating in 2004 with Godzilla Final Wars, which featured at least a dozen kaiju, some of them computer animated, as well as Matrix-style fight scenes and music by Keith Emerson of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. In one scene, Godzilla even battles another Godzilla that looks like the one from the 1998 Matthew Broderick film. Godzilla Final Wars actually had its world premiere at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood on November 29, 2004.
I remember.
It would be a dozen years before Toho would make a new Godzilla film, a true reboot of the entire franchise.
It's way too much.
Way too much.
For the project, first known as Godzilla Resurgence and eventually Shin Godzilla, Toho hired directors Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi. Known for such animated projects as Attack on Titan and Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Nerd.
According to director Shinji Higuchi, "I was over the moon when I received the offer to helm Shin Godzilla, but I felt obliged to feign calmness at the time, fearing that showing my excitement might make it look unprofessional. We tried to use monsters to reflect the social problems of the time. We were concerned about what would happen to regular people if Godzilla were real. The Fukushima meltdown and the Tohoku earthquake are the sort of natural disasters that haven't been seen in several hundred years. In a way, those disasters are the kaiju of our day. We didn't base Shin Godzilla's characters on real people. Actually, it was more like wish fulfillment. I wish there were people like Higuchi. So don't forget to silence and darken your devices and no talking or eating. Community partnership provided by, for today's Godzillathon, provided by Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, Gold House, Japan Foundation Los Angeles, Japan House LA, Japan Society, Little Tokyo Historical Society, UCLA Terasaki Center for Japanese Studies, and Visual Communications. There will be a 15-minute break roughly between the next 2 final movies, and now screening in a 4K DCP, courtesy of Toho, Shin Godzilla. To conclude our Godzillathon, it's time to move 7 years into the future, but also more than 70 years into the past, with another Godzilla film that, like Shin Godzilla, completely restarts the series. Takashi Yamazaki, the writer-director of Godzilla Minus One, is also a visual effects supervisor who worked on Shin Godzilla. And in 2021, he wrote and directed Godzilla The Ride, Giant Monster Ultimate Battle, a 3D motion simulator ride in Saitama, Japan, which places audiences at the center of a battle between Godzilla and Ghidorah. According to Yama, even more scary. I was a very scared child, but I was drawn to it at the same time, so there was this dichotomy. I was a kid who liked dinosaurs as well, so that was another draw. My favorite movie would definitely be the first original Godzilla, and then after that would be Shin Godzilla and Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack. Shin Godzilla was amazing. When Toho asked me if I could do the next Godzilla film, I could only think, I have to follow Shin? I love the original Godzilla, and I felt I should stay true to that spirit, addressing the issues of war and nuclear weapons. There's a concept in Japan called tatarigami. There are good gods and there are bad gods. Godzilla is half monster, but he's also half god. I wanted to tell a story about perseverance and bravery from the perspective of people who are at the bottom in a society that was dealing with the devastation of feeling like it had lost everything during the war. Everyone's already living with post-traumatic stress disorder and not knowing how to carry on. But then Godzilla shows up, and while the situation becomes even more dire, the threat he poses is also what gives people like Koichi a reason to step up to the occasion. I really wanted to look at how the war affected people at that time, not just adults, but children and younger people who were too young to go to war, or the war ended before they could be deployed. That generation grew up alongside people telling that, no, the war is over, and you have to be thankful for what you have. Looking at the war from those different perspectives and reflecting on those personal experiences that really informed people's feelings was really important to me. It was right in the middle of the pandemic when I was first writing that script. In those early first few weeks, we had the sense of, hey, the government's not doing anything. This is going to be up to us. Of course, the Japanese government eventually stepped up later, but I wanted the script to reflect that feeling of people realizing that presented with a problem like Godzilla, they would have to rise to the occasion themselves to survive. I wanted Godzilla to feel like the physical embodiment of a kind of negative energy tied to people's fears, worries, and disillusionment. We humans were not necessarily there to kill Godzilla, we're there to calm him. Minus One is about putting a name and face on something scary, inviting the audience to calm that negative presence through the shared experience of watching the film. This was a very intentional decision on my part. Out of all the Godzillas there have been throughout the years, scary Godzilla, cute Godzilla, the more heroic Godzilla, etc., my favorite is still the original from the very first movie. That Godzilla specifically represented war and our collective anxieties about nuclear arms. That idea is still present in a lot of depictions of Godzilla, but I've also felt like a lot of his original essence has faded over time. So I wanted to bring some of that original intention behind Godzilla back, and more to the forefront, and the shots of nuclear clouds are a big part of that. Takashi Yamazaki was not only the film's writer-director, but also its visual effects supervisor. Godzilla Minus One became the first Godzilla film to receive an Academy Award nomination. And on March 10th, 2024, it became the first non-English language film to receive the visual effects Oscar. For Yamazaki, Kyoka Shibuya, Masaki Takahashi, and Tetsuji Nojima. Yamazaki accepted the award for his team and gave the following speech. My career began 40 years ago after the shock of seeing Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind to somewhere so far from Hollywood that even the possibility of standing on the stage seemed out of reach. The moment we were nominated, we felt like Rocky Balboa, welcomed into the ring as the equals by our biggest rivals, which was already a miracle. But here we stand. To all the VFX artists outside of Hollywood, Hollywood is listening, and this award is proof that everyone has a chance. Finally, on behalf of the casting crew of Godzilla Minus One, I want to tell our producer, Shuji Abe, who we lost too soon. We did it. Thank you so much. And by the way, last week Toho announced that Yamazaki will be writing and directing the next Godzilla film. One final reminder, don't forget to silence and darken your devices and no talking or eating during the film. Community partnership support for today's Godzillathon has been provided by Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, Gold House, Japan Foundation Los Angeles, Japan House LA, Japan Society, Little Tokyo Historical Society, UCLA Terasaki Center for Japanese Studies, and Visual Communications. And now finally, on a DCP, courtesy of Toho, we conclude our Godzillathon with Godzilla -1.
No.